My name is Megan. I was 26 when my parents told me there wasn't enough space for me at our annual family vacation in Turks and Caicos. They called it a tradition, something sacred, a week of sun and sand, no phones, no drama. But this year, the group text went quiet, no dates, no confirmation. I reached out to Mum. She told me they'd scaled back this time, fewer people, just the core. Her tone was light, like she was protecting me from stress. "You're always so busy with work," she said. "We figured you'd appreciate the time." I believed her. Even when my cousin Brittany posted an Instagram story of palm trees and tagged our usual resort. Even when I spotted the corner of my dad's floral shirt in the background. Even when the caption said, "Reunion week begins," and every single sibling, cousin and plus one I knew was there, except me. I stared at the screen for 20 minutes. Then I booked the flight. I didn't tell anyone. I just packed light, wore my old Williams Family 2018 tank top, and landed 48 hours into their trip. A taxi ride later, I was standing at the white stucco entrance of the oceanfront villa I had helped pay for last year. The staff remembered me. They smiled too wide, offered a rum punch. "Your family is by the pool, Miss Megan." Pool. I walked around the side of the villa down the stone path lined with hibiscus and stopped cold. They were all there. 23 bodies sprawled across sunbeds and beanbags, matching tank tops, matching drinks. Laughter rolling over the water like nothing had ever changed. Even the dog. Bentley, my sister's golden retriever, was lounging on a pool chair with a towel draped over him like royalty. No one saw me at first. Then Brittany gasped, "Oh my God, Megan!" Heads turned. My mother sat up slowly, adjusting her sunglasses. "Sweetheart, what are you doing here?" I felt the air tighten. "I saw the photos," I said flatly. "I thought I'd surprise you." Awkward silence. Then a flurry of movement, chairs shuffled, drinks hidden. Mum stood. "We just didn't think you'd want to come." "Why?" "You're always independent, focused. This was a low-key thing. We didn't want to distract you." "From my family?" "No," she said quickly. "It's just, space was limited." I looked at the villa, 6 bedrooms, a guest house, an outdoor suite. My name wasn't missing because of space. And then I saw it. Through the open patio door, a room with blue sheets, a suitcase on the floor, and Bentley's crate in the corner. His chew toy on the pillow. "That was my room last year," I said quietly. No one answered. I turned back. "So the dog got my bed." Dad cleared his throat. "Let's not turn this into something." Brittany looked away. Mum stepped closer. "Please don't make a scene." The rage didn't come in a flood. It came in small, sharp drops. Humiliation disguised as grace. Betrayal hiding under beach umbrellas. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I walked past them, into the villa, straight to the guest fridge, and dumped every rosé bottle they'd labelled for sunset photos into the sink. I didn't say a word, because I hadn't come to be heard. I came to be seen. I stood in the kitchen of the villa with a pink puddle of rosé dripping down the sink and silence pressing against the walls. Behind me, no one moved. No one. I could feel their tension vibrating through the floorboards, like I'd ruptured something they were desperate to keep intact. I didn't turn around. I pulled the last labelled bottle from the cooler, uncorked it with a snap, and poured it straight into the trash can. Then I set the empty glass on the marble counter like punctuation. Finally, Mum spoke. "Okay, that was childish." I turned slowly. "What's childish is lying about space and then giving my room to a golden retriever." Mum scoffed, like she was trying to find the moral high ground. "We didn't lie, we just didn't include you this time." "That's the same thing." "Not really. We thought you'd understand." I laughed, low and flat. "You thought I'd understand watching my entire family vacation without me while I sit home refreshing your social media." "Don't exaggerate," she said sharply. "It wasn't personal." But it was. Every second of it was personal. The printed tank tops, the shared playlist, the place cards at the dinner table I saw through the sliding doors. They hadn't just forgotten me. They'd planned this without me. "Look," Dad finally said, stepping into the kitchen. "We've all had a long day. Why don't we just cool off and talk tomorrow?" Sure, I said. I'll just go find somewhere to sleep, since every bed seems to be taken. Brittany cleared her throat. There's a hammock outside, she offered. The rage flared again, but I swallowed it. I nodded slowly, turned and walked out past the pool, not to the hammock, to the guest house. I'd helped pay for that too. The side door wasn't locked. Inside it was cool, clean and empty, probably reserved for late arrivals. A towel lay folded on the bed. A tray of still unopened welcome chocolates waited on the desk. I dropped my bag by the door and locked it behind me. Let them guess where I'd gone. Let them wonder what version of me had just landed on their doorstep. Because the Megan they'd designed their vacation around avoiding, she wasn't staying quiet anymore. The next morning, I walked into the breakfast patio just as they were pouring mimosas. I was dressed in white linen pants and the same tank top they'd all abandoned in favor of this year's design. Their new ones read Williams Family 2024. Mine? Mine had the faded logo from 5 years ago, barely visible, like history they'd tried to erase. Someone dropped a fork when they saw me. I smiled, cool and unbothered, and took the seat at the end of the table, the one they hadn't set. Morning, I said, lifting a napkin from another setting and placing it in my lap. Mum blinked. We didn't know you were coming to breakfast. Neither did the dog, I replied, but I figured if he can eat here, I can too. No one laughed. Dad cleared his throat again. We'll, pull up a chair. No need, I said. This one works just fine. The server arrived with eggs and fruit. He looked at me, hesitated, then smiled. Miss Megan, we've got your usual from last year. Should I bring it out? I held his gaze. Absolutely. I didn't even glance at my mother, but I could feel her watching. This wasn't a tantrum. It was presence. And I'd just reclaimed mine. The next event on their itinerary was a boat cruise around the island. Something we used to plan together, down to the playlist and cocktail menu. This year, I wasn't on the planning text chain. But I knew the route, knew the boat, knew that once we were at sea, there would be no walking away. That's why I showed up first. I was already on board when they arrived, leaning against the rail, sunglasses on, hair tied up in the same braid Mum used to do for me when I was little. They climbed aboard one by one. Some avoided eye contact. Others gave fake smiles, brittle at the edges. Mum stepped up last, holding a plastic container with gluten-free cupcakes, Brittany's favourite. She saw me and paused. You're early, she said. Didn't want to miss anything. The crew cast off. Music started. Mimosas were passed. For a moment it felt normal. Wind in my hair, salt in the air. My cousin's toddler climbing into my lap without hesitation. The only one who didn't know what I wasn't supposed to be. But then the microphone came out. It always did. Dad liked speeches, loved being the centre of attention when the boat turned around for the sunset, and the drinks had dulled everyone's edges. He tapped the mic like an entertainer. All right, family, he said. Tradition time. A few people cheered. I want to raise a glass to the MVP of this trip, he said. The one who really made this vacation special, who made us laugh, kept us on schedule, handled the playlist, even brought her own pillows, Brittany. Applause. Whistling. Brittany did a mock bow. I smiled, polite. Then Dad added, and of course, special shout-out to our surprise guest, Megan, our honorary stowaway. The crowd chuckled. Someone clinked a glass. My smile didn't change. Dad wasn't done. We didn't plan for you, kiddo, but you sure made an entrance. Isappa. Even the rum got nervous. Laughter again. Even Mom chuckled this time. I looked around the deck. No one met my eyes. No one except the server handing me a drink. He hesitated, then whispered, That was rough. I nodded once. Thanks. Then I stood, walked calmly to the bar, and took the mic. Hi, I said. Megan here. Surprise guest, apparently. A few titters. I wasn't on the list, or the group chat, or the matching shirt order, but I am on the birth certificate. Silence. Just wanted to thank everyone for the warm welcome, especially Bentley for vacating my bed without protest. Much appreciated. Dead quiet. I handed the mic back, then walked to the bow of the boat and leaned into the wind. Let them sit in it. Let them feel it. The laughter stopped after that, but the tension, that had only just begun. That evening, they hosted a casual beach dinner. Long wooden tables set right on the sand, candles in glass jars, fresh seafood steaming under linen covers, the kind of setup that ended up in brochures. I wore a black sundress, simple, sharp, the only one not in pastel. When I arrived, most seats were already filled. Someone, probably Brittany, had made name cards. Everyone's name, handwritten in gold ink, placed just so. There wasn't one for me. I didn't react. I walked to the empty end of the table, grabbed a napkin, folded it in half, and wrote my name with the eyeliner in my purse, slid it in front of my plate like it belonged. People noticed. No one said a word. Halfway through dinner, with conversation strained and the waves louder than the laughter, Dad clinked his glass again. All right, he said, standing. One last thing before dessert. I braced myself. We're going to do the family photo now, he said. Everyone down by the fire pit. Let's go. Chairs scraped, plates shifted. People moved like it was routine, like the shot had already been envisioned in someone's head. I followed them down the sand. The photographer was waiting, a local with a wide hat and a bored expression. She pointed to a small dune. Whole group here, parents in the middle, kids flanking out. They arranged themselves fast, efficient, practiced. I stepped forward, and Brittany blocked me. Maybe let the core take the first one, she said, sweetly venomous. I blinked. The what? You know, parents, siblings, the real crew. I stared at her, then turned to Mom. She avoided my eyes. We'll get one with everyone right after, sweetheart. But this one's going on the wall, right? I asked, voice razor thin. Silence. No one answered. I stepped back, not because I agreed, but because I refused to beg for space in a shot that wasn't meant for me. I stood just out of frame and watched them pose, watched them smile, watched the shutter click 3 times. Enough for safety. Enough for permanence. Then, like it was nothing, they dispersed. The photographer turned to me. You want in for the next? I shook my head. Actually, I said, would you take one more? Just of me? She nodded, curious. I walked to the empty fire pit, sat on the log farthest from the glow and looked directly into the lens. No smile. Just presence. Click. That was the photo I wanted. Later, while they laughed over rum cake, I airdropped the shot to my own phone, filtered it black and white, and saved it as the lock screen. Not because I looked good, but because I looked true. And that was something their group shot could never touch. The next morning, they planned a snorkeling tour along the reef. It had always been my favourite part of these trips. The silence beneath the water. The colours no one could fake. The temporary weightlessness that made everything above seem small. We boarded the catamaran early. The crew handed out gear. Fins clattered across the deck. Sunscreen was passed like communion. Mum barely acknowledged me as I stepped on. She was wearing a wide-brimmed hat and a lemon-coloured sarong, pretending her view of the sea required full attention. I sat at the opposite edge of the boat, adjusted my mask, and let the breeze tangle my hair. Brittany's laugh carried over the engine. I still can't believe she came, she said. I froze. I wasn't the only one who heard it. She wasn't whispering. She's like a tide you thought receded and then, bam, right back on your towel, she added. More laughter. Someone said, maybe she finally figured out she's not the main character. I didn't turn. I didn't flinch. I waited, watched the coastline shrink behind us. When we reached the cove, the anchor dropped, the water sparkled impossibly clear. One by one, they jumped in, colourful fins flashing like fish. I was last. The crew member handed me a belt and said softly, just float. Let them swim ahead. I nodded and slipped under. Down there, no one could touch me, no voices, no smirks, no curated exclusion. Just coral. And quiet. But when I surfaced 20 minutes later, adjusting my mask, I caught the end of a conversation that cracked something in me I couldn't put back. Mum. To Brittany, standing waist-deep by the reef line. She doesn't belong here anymore. She just doesn't know it yet. Not angry, not sad, just matter of fact. The kind of statement made by someone who believes they've already rewritten the ending. I floated there, 20 feet away, forgotten. Or so they thought. I treaded water for another 10 minutes. Then I swam silently back to the boat, climbed the ladder, and wrapped myself in a towel. Something had changed. I wasn't the extra anymore. I was the observer. And observers, they collect. Details, patterns, leverage. By the time the rest returned, I was already sipping from a coconut, face unreadable behind my sunglasses. Dad joked, "You done brooding?" I smiled sweetly. "No, I'm just getting started." No one laughed this time. No one dared. That night, dinner was set on the villa terrace, lanterns swinging, silverware gleaming under string lights. It was their last big meal before departure. I knew the ritual: toasts, slideshow, final words before packing up tans and secrets. I came dressed in navy silk, clean lines, deliberate. They noticed, but no one said a word. I took my seat, this time without hesitation. No place card again, but I didn't need one. I sat dead center across from Mum. Forced symmetry. They passed ceviche, poured wine. Someone played acoustic covers of pop songs no one admitted liking. The conversation hovered over shallow things. Flight times, tan lines, which sunscreen didn't sting. Until Dad cleared his throat. "We want to thank everyone again," he said. "It's been another beautiful trip, probably our last big one for a while." A pause. Everyone murmured. Mum chimed in. "We're thinking of downsizing." Brittany leaned in. "You mean the lake house?" Dad nodded. "It's too much upkeep. We might pass it on. Let the next generation enjoy it." That word, pass, hung heavy. Cousin Brian raised a glass. "Long as I'm not stuck with that broken dock again." Laughter. Then Brittany with a smirk sharp enough to cut glass. "As long as Megan doesn't get it, we're safe." Stunned silence, half a second too long. Then nervous chuckles. Even from Mum. I didn't blink. Dad tried to wave it off. "Don't start." But the air shifted. The table turned cold despite the tropical night. I set my fork down, folded my hands, and asked, "And why wouldn't I?" Brittany sipped her wine. "Oh, come on, it was a joke." "No, you made a statement. Say it again." "Megan." "Say it." She looked to Mum, who stayed silent. Then to Dad, who shrugged. "You're not really in the loop anymore," Brittany said. "With the trust, the house, the lake property, it's kind of been handled. Handled without me." Brittany looked away. And that's when I knew. It wasn't just this trip. It wasn't just a missing chair or a blocked group chat. It had been building behind my back, brick by brick, while they smiled to my face. They hadn't excluded me for space. They'd excluded me from a future. I stood slowly. "I hope you kept receipts," I said. "For what?" Mum asked. "For what comes next." No one moved. I walked away from the table, down the wooden steps toward the beach. But this time, not in retreat, in preparation. Because exclusion has a price, and I'd just discovered mine had been calculated long ago. I walked until the lights from the villa blurred into yellow specks behind me. The stars were sharp and silent, the sand still hot underfoot. I didn't cry. I sat down by a driftwood log, dug my heels into the shore and pulled out my phone. No music, no scrolling, just a name I hadn't dialed in over a year, because I'd hoped I'd never need to. She picked up on the third ring. "Meg?" I swallowed hard. "Remember that estate clause you said was weird?" Silence. Then, "Tell me everything." For the next 20 minutes I poured it out. Not just the dinner, the toast, the photo, the room with the dog, the boat speech, but the paperwork I'd been excluded from, the trust no one told me had changed, the feeling that this wasn't a family vacation. It was a quiet redrafting of history. "You're not crazy," she said calmly. "You're being written out, on paper and off." My nails dug into the sand. "I want to see every revision, every signature, every beneficiary transfer. Already on it. You'll have a full report within the week. Do not confront them again without something in your hand." "I won't," I said. "Not yet." I hung up and just sat there, breathing. The water kept lapping at the shore like it didn't care who was betrayed and who did the betraying. But I cared. I stood, brushed the sand off my dress, and walked back toward the villa with a new stillness inside me. They didn't notice me return. They were gathered around the fire pit, laughing over dessert like nothing had cracked, as if I were a shadow that passed and dissolved. Mum's voice rose above the others. Honestly, we've done so much for her. She just doesn't appreciate family the way she used to. I didn't stop walking, didn't react, just slipped back into the guest house and locked the door. My phone buzzed an hour later. A message from my cousin's husband. I saw everything. Just wanted to say you're not wrong. That was all. I stared at the screen, a tiny fissure in their united wall, proof someone else saw what they were doing, and didn't like it. I didn't reply, not yet. The time for words was passing. Action was next. I laid back on the bed and stared at the ceiling, letting my mind race through timelines and names, assets and patterns. If they wanted me gone, they should have done it quietly. Instead, they did it where I could see them, surrounded by lanterns and lies, and now they'd given me proof. Morning on the last full day. The villa smelled of coffee and salted fruit. The staff had laid out papaya, banana bread, and eggs over easy, my favourite once. I arrived late, on purpose. Let them relax into the lie a little longer. The table was half full when I took my seat. Mum glanced up from her teacup. Brittany didn't look at me at all. Dad muttered, "Thought you'd be sleeping in today." "Nope," I said. Didn't want to miss the family budget meeting. Forks froze. Brittany glanced around. "Budget?" I nodded. "The one where we pretend I don't notice how the lake property was quietly reassigned to a sub-trust under your name, along with the boat." I didn't raise my voice, didn't smile, just laid it down like a playing card. Mum's hand twitched near her napkin. "That's not public information." I turned to her. "No, it's family information, which means I should have had access before the documents were even drafted." Dad's face went pale. Brittany laughed, nervous. "Megan, what are you even talking about? You're listed as secondary beneficiary on the revocable trust, with conditional conversion clauses I'm pretty sure even you don't understand." Now everyone was staring. "How do you know that?" Mum's voice cracked, barely audible. I met her gaze. "Because I don't rely on group texts to know where I stand." Silence, only the clink of a butter knife hitting porcelain. Cousin Brian coughed deliberately. "Maybe we should enjoy breakfast?" "No," I said. "I think this is exactly what breakfast is for. We've had fake mimosas and curated exclusion for a week straight. I'd like a side of transparency for once." Brittany stood. "You don't get to crash our vacation and act like you're owed anything." "Crash?" I echoed. "I've been funding this trip in silence for 3 years. Check the resort deposits. Guess who signed them?" That stopped her. I saw the flicker in Dad's face, realization colliding with exposure. "Why now?" Mum asked, voice thin. "Why make a scene?" I didn't flinch. "Because you chose the dog over me. Because you toasted my absence like it was comic relief. Because you knew I wouldn't stay silent forever. And you bet I didn't have the proof." I stood slowly. "This is me proving you wrong." No one moved. No one chewed. The only sound was the ocean, soft and endless beyond the patio rail. I placed my napkin down, walked away from the table and left their curated world behind, for now. I didn't need them to explode. I just needed them to crack. And I'd heard the first sound. I spent the next hour by the shore, watching the tide drag foam back and forth across the sand like it was erasing footprints. I needed silence, not peace, just clarity. And then one of the villa staff approached, cautiously. A young man in a blue uniform shirt, holding a flat cream envelope. "Miss Megan," he said, "a courier left this with your name. Said it was private." I blinked. No one on this island knew I was here. Not officially. I took it, turned it over. No return, just my name. Full name. In handwriting I hadn't seen since high school. Mum's. I opened it slowly. Inside a single-page letter, dated 2 years ago. The letter she'd once claimed was destroyed in a filing accident, the one I'd only seen a glimpse of before it vanished. She'd written it after Grandma's funeral. Addressed to the trust lawyer. In it she made her case, to remove me as an inheritor and reassign my portion to Brittany, citing emotional instability and disengagement from family values. She'd used words like risk management and domestic volatility. I didn't shake. I read it twice. Then a third time, slower. At the bottom, a signature, respectfully submitted Emily Williams. And beside it, a note scrawled in a different hand. Never filed, couldn't do it. But you needed to know. No name. Just an underlined initial. J, someone inside her circle. Or someone inside her conscience. I folded it carefully, slid it back in the envelope, and held it in both hands like it was weightless and burning all at once. They'd tried to erase me not just with silence, but with documents, with intentions, with quiet rewrites, and someone else had seen it, someone had saved it. My phone buzzed again. Another message, this time from the same cousin's husband as before. Check the desk drawer in the office, behind the receipts. I didn't question it. I walked back into the villa like I was getting a towel. Everyone else was at the pool. I slipped into the office, shut the door, and knelt by the oak desk. Pulled open the bottom drawer. Receipts, resort invoices, a stack of spa appointment cards. And behind them, a flash drive, unlabeled. I pocketed it, heart steady. I didn't need to know what was on it yet, just that someone was tipping the balance back. And they had chosen me. That night, I didn't sit with them at dinner. I dressed in black, took a seat at the far edge of the beach and watched them from a distance. Watched how easily they laughed, how quickly shame washed off when no one held it in place. But I wasn't the one holding shame anymore. I was holding leverage. And tomorrow they'd learn what that really meant. They were already seated when I walked in. Last breakfast, last morning. Luggage stacked by the doors, airport vans idling somewhere down the hill, the farewell meal. Papaya again, eggs again, but this time with something brittle in the air. Something that didn't melt with syrup or jokes. I walked straight to the table, held nothing but the envelope. Mum saw it first. Her face froze so fast the blood didn't follow. I sat down across from her quietly and slid the envelope into the centre. Careful, like setting a matchbox on dry leaves. Dad looked at it, looked at me. "What's this?" I said nothing. Mum reached for it. I stopped her hand with 2 fingers. "No," I said. "You don't get to touch it again." Eyes. Every eye turned toward us. Brittany halfway through a mimosa, her straw paused mid-sip. "I got mail yesterday," I said. Odd, considering I wasn't even supposed to be on this trip. Silence. I took a breath. Let the ocean fill it. It was a letter. From 2 years ago, signed by you. I nodded at Mum. Requesting my removal from the family trust due to alleged emotional risk and domestic volatility. Gasps. Real ones. Dad coughed, choking on toast. "Wait, what are you—" "I have it in writing," I cut him off. "I have the signature. I have the original. And I have a note from someone you work with who never filed it because they had something you lost." Mum's voice cracked. "What?" "Conscience." Brittany shoved her chair back. "This is insane." "Sit down," I snapped. Not yelled, but commanded. She did. Mum reached for her water, but her hand was trembling. "You told me it was destroyed. You looked me in the eyes at Grandma's memorial and said it was nothing. Said I was being dramatic." More silence. The table a battlefield now. Dad finally spoke. "That wasn't meant to be." "Wasn't meant to be seen," I corrected. "But it was. And now, so will everything else." I placed the flash drive next to the envelope, watched their pupils track it like a weapon. "There's more," I said. "Financials, transfers, internal communications, all of it." Brittany's face drained of colour. Mum opened her mouth, then closed it again. Words failing where manipulation used to thrive. I stood. "This isn't a tantrum. It's a notification." I walked out before anyone could speak again. And this time, I didn't just have my dignity. I had proof. And that was something they couldn't erase, burn, or toast away. I was halfway to the courtyard when Brittany caught up with me. She didn't yell. That would have been too honest. "No," she hissed. "You're ruining everything," she snapped, gripping her sunglasses like they might break in her hand. "Do you realise what you've done?" I turned slowly. The truth? I said. Yeah, I know exactly what that looks like. She glanced around to make sure no one was watching. But the patio wasn't empty. The staff was clearing breakfast, and a few distant relatives were hovering by the pool. Still, she leaned closer. No one's going to believe you, she said. You always twist things. You get obsessed. You make everything bigger than it is. That's why you were cut out. That last part, she thought she whispered it, but it was too late. I reached into my bag, pulled out the small black device I'd carried since the second day of the trip. Not a secret, not illegal, just smart. I clicked it, and her voice played back. Verbatim. You always twist things, you get obsessed. That's why you were cut out. Her face blanched. You recorded me. I raised an eyebrow. You said I make everything up. Now you don't have to wonder. She looked like she might scream, or faint, but she did neither. Just stood there, hands shaking, frozen like her mask had finally cracked too far to fix. I leaned in. I could have buried this, I said quietly. But you buried me first. I left her there, trembling, silenced, and exposed. Back in my room, I texted my lawyer 2 words, prepare file. Within minutes, I got the reply. It's ready. They won't recover from this. I opened my laptop, watched the documents download. Not just the trust changes, but the villa payments. The tax evasion Brittany thought no one had seen. The clause that Mom had signed regarding inheritance allocations based on subjective stability. Everything, all in one place. I saved it to 3 separate drives and printed 1 physical copy. I wasn't planning revenge anymore. I was implementing it. By lunchtime, the house was quiet. They knew. Every laugh now came with a second glance. Every whispered sentence trailed off when I entered the room. The power had shifted, not in a surge, but a slow, suffocating tide. Mom avoided me. Dad disappeared for a call. Brittany didn't speak. She watched me like a fuse that had already sparked, and she couldn't tell how long was left before detonation. And me? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't raise a hand. I raised the stakes, because when the truth is denied long enough, its return is not gentle. It's surgical. And tomorrow morning? They'd learn what precision really looked like. Departure day. The villa was already half empty by 7 a.m. Suitcases lined the entry like barricades. Brittany paced with sunglasses too large for her face, while Dad stood outside, fake smiling for group selfies with distant cousins. Mum? She stayed in her room. No final breakfast. No hugs. No safe flight. I didn't need any of it. I watched from the balcony, calm as tidewater. One by one, the vans rolled down the drive. I took the last one alone. At the airport, we all reconvened by force, corralled by boarding zones and security ropes, pretending to be strangers who looked alike. No one spoke to me. Not a glance. Not a word. Until the gate agent called my name. Final boarding for Group 1. Megan Williams. Loud, clear, just enough heads turned. I stepped forward. All eyes briefly flicked toward me, including theirs. That's when I reached into my bag and pulled out the printed file. Clipped, highlighted, legal headers visible, and laid it on the counter beside my passport. Please have this notarized at check-in, I said to the agent. It's a corporate consent form for asset release. Requires timestamp. The woman blinked. We don't usually handle... It's pre-approved. Just needs validation. She looked at the top page. Her expression changed. Understood. One moment. Behind me, Mum's voice, sharp and low. What are you doing? I turned to face her. Reclaiming what you tried to erase. Dad stepped forward, whispering. Let's not make this a scene. You made it a structure, I said. I'm just removing the rot. The gate agent returned, paper stamped. Thank you, I said. Please make a copy for internal travel records. She nodded, eyes flicking between me and the family like she'd walked into the climax of a movie no one warned her was playing. I boarded alone. Row 1, window seat. Champagne already waiting. I didn't look back. Not at Mum, who now stood speechless with nothing left to deny. Not at Brittany, whose hand trembled holding her phone. Not at Dad, who realized too late that neutrality has a cost. Up in the sky, somewhere over Florida, I opened the file again, not to review. I knew it by heart, but to remind myself this wasn't revenge. It was recovery, and I'd earned every inch of it. The wheels hit tarmac with a soft thunk. I didn't clap, didn't sigh with relief. I just unbuckled, collected my bag, and walked into the terminal like a woman who'd just stepped out of fire wearing the deed. The first call came as soon as I reconnected to Wi-Fi. Dad. Second, Brittany. Third, fourth, fifth. All from numbers I didn't save but knew. Aunt Carol, Uncle Steve, the ones who hadn't said a word all week, the ones who smiled in photos and said nothing when I was humiliated with a toast. I didn't answer, not until the sixth call came. Blocked number. I hesitated, then tapped accept. Silence. Then Mum's voice, fragile and raw. You win. I didn't speak. She tried again. Megan, we were just trying to protect the family. We thought you wouldn't want to be part of it anymore. My voice was steady. You didn't protect a family. You protected Brittany. A pause. Then, something I hadn't heard from her in years. I'm sorry. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was empty, a whisper over a canyon. You wrote me off before I had the chance to leave, I said, and then tried to make it look like my choice. More silence. She asked, soft, what happens now? I let the question hang. I haven't decided yet. I ended the call. Outside the terminal, the air smelled like exhaust and rain. My driver held a sign with my name on it, the full one. No nicknames, no diminutives. I nodded, slid into the back seat, and pulled out my folder. Inside, a copy of the trust, marked with the violations, highlighted with their own words, the kind of proof that didn't require argument, just submission. And I had the lawyer to make it happen. But revenge didn't feel like fire anymore. It felt like metal. Cold, final, clean. We pulled into my building 30 minutes later. Familiar lobby, familiar doorman. But I was a stranger now. Not to the place, but to the woman who left 2 weeks ago, unsure if she even had a place. Now I knew. Inside my apartment, I opened the balcony doors and stood looking out at the skyline. Not glamorous, just honest. My phone buzzed again. This time, a text. If you ever want to talk, I'll listen. From Brian, the only one who'd spoken up, even in a whisper. I didn't reply, but I didn't delete it either. Not every thread needed cutting, just most of them. I poured a glass of water, watched the sun cut lines through the blinds, and finally let myself exhale. Tomorrow, I'd decide the terms. Tonight, I'd just breathe. In a home no one could steal. 2 days passed. No more calls, no new apologies. Just silence. The kind that comes when people realize the performance has ended and the audience isn't clapping. I didn't need them to reach out anymore. I'd already decided. So I packed a box, not big, just enough to hold what mattered. The letter, the original one, signed by Mum. A flash drive with copies of every document, trust amendments, bank transfers, the audio recording from Brittany, and the notarized form from the airport. And on top, a photograph. Me, age 10. On Grandma's lap at the lake house, smiling. The same house they tried to steal through paperwork and manipulation. I wrote one line on the back. This is what you lost. I sealed the box, addressed it to the family P.O. box they all shared, and dropped it at the courier counter without a second thought. No return label, no sender, no signature. They would know, and I wouldn't have to say a word. That evening, I met Brian at a small rooftop bar. He didn't ask questions, just raised his glass. To truth, he said. I raised mine. To survival. We talked about everything but family, work, plans, music, the absurdity of Florida humidity. I laughed harder than I had in weeks. Real laughter. Not sharp, not bitter. Just honest. He asked if I'd go back. Ever, I shook my head. No need, they already know I left. Later that night, I stood in front of the mirror, brushing my hair, catching my own eyes for the first time without flinching. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't grieving. I wasn't even waiting for closure. I'd created my own, not with fire, not with screaming, but with proof. and silence. The kind that doesn't ask for permission, the kind that holds its own shape. Because sometimes survival isn't loud. It's mailed in a brown box with no name, and everything they tried to pretend never existed. The package was delivered at 9:14 a.m. I know because the courier app pinged once, and I turned off notifications for good. They'd open it. They'd see what they tried to hide, what they tried to rewrite, living and breathing on paper and plastic. They'd read the date on the letter, the signature, the tiny handwritten initial that saved me. They'd hear Brittany's voice word for word in her own tone, trying to turn my isolation into their victory, but it wasn't mine to witness anymore. That chapter was written, and I had no interest in the sequel. Instead, I walked to the park near my building. One of those small, overlooked corners of the city that no tourist ever photographs. Just grass, benches, a fountain with a chipped lion head. Ordinary and perfect. I sat on a bench and watched a little girl feed pigeons with her dad. He wore a tired hoodie and hospital shoes, but the way he looked at her, like she was everything, struck me. It was the look I had searched for, begged for, then learned to fake in others. And somehow, sitting there watching strangers, I didn't feel robbed anymore. I felt rebuilt, because what they tried to erase was never the money, never the inheritance. It was the version of me that scared them most, the one who could stand alone and not shatter. They spent years pruning me back, and I still bloomed. At home, I cleaned out a drawer I hadn't opened in months. Inside, old family photos, a few cards from birthdays that had come with conditions, and one voicemail saved from 3 years ago. Mum, saying, "I'm proud of you," in a tone that never reached her eyes. I deleted it, not with anger, but peace. I replaced it with something else, a photo from the villa. Not of them, of me, standing by the cliff just after sunrise, face unreadable, spine straight, wind in my hair. That was the woman they feared, and that was the woman who stayed. I wrote a single sentence beneath it in pen, "I will never be erased," and placed it in the drawer. No fanfare, no audience, just truth, where it could finally live without flinching. Sometimes closure doesn't come from confrontation. It comes from deciding what you'll no longer carry and letting the weight fall back on the hands that tried to give it to you. As I shut the drawer and locked it, I whispered one thing to the empty room. A farewell they'd never hear, a vow they'd never undo. I remember who I am now.